listening to Friday Live on Nebraska Public Media. Support for programming comes from Bedient Organ of Lincoln, celebrating over 50 years of designing, building, restoring, and servicing pipe organs throughout Nebraska and across the United States. On the web at bedientorgan.com. If you wanted to fly from Nebraska to India, that could take you upwards of 24 hours. This winter, though, you can experience the art and stories of India much closer to home at the Jackson Dinsdale Art Center at Hastings College. Art of India is open now and runs through March 15th in the JADAC's West and East galleries. This exhibition features works from the private collections of Catherine and Mark LeBaron and Karen and Robert Duncan, which is curated by Ann Pagel, a private curator and longtime arts professional. And she joins me this morning. Ann, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Genevieve. It's a delight.
This is a kind of unique exhibition that we've got going here. Since this is from private collections,
right,
how often does the public get to see some of these pieces?
Well, it is unusual to have that opportunity. So for that reason, I hope a lot of people can get to JADAC at Hastings College, the art center there, and see the exhibition. The Duncans and the LeBarons have been to India time and time again. They love it. And they have acquired a number of pieces, and the works in their collections are contemporary. They deal with contemporary issues, things that have to do with India, of course, and there are many challenges that confront the country, so the artworks deal with those things in a very interesting and exciting way. And excuse me.
Oh, you're okay.
So it really is an exceptional show.
Yeah. I want to come back to the issues thing in a moment, but I'm curious, if I don't know that much about Indian art from India, what is the difference between contemporary and what you might see in more traditional or folk art?
Most of the artists have advanced degrees. They operate on an international scale. They're artists whose works would be comfortable in New York. So they approach their art in a very international way, and yet it has a very localized and personal content. On the other hand, there are something like 700 tribal groups in India, and they produce traditional art, and you would be amazed at how well some of their works, quilts, even puppetry, lives well with contemporary art, and so they've acquired a number of those pieces too.
Did you say puppetry?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm curious to know more, Ann.
They're very, very different from anything you would possibly imagine. And puppets that are displayed in teeny tiny tent. Well, I would say 8 feet tall by maybe 3 feet by 3 feet wide, and with little curtained areas at the top, and these little hand-carved puppets. And the individuals who make these things are so committed to their to the puppets themselves. They're named as like children. It's just great. It's absolutely fascinating.
Are there examples of that in this particular?
I hope so, and I'm trying to remember as I'm going on and on about this. It was a late edition, and I can't remember if they're in there. If not, then I can tell you there are other wonderful things, but I hope they are.
What if you had to estimate a percentage of the Duncan and LeBaron collection that is from India? How much of that are we seeing in Hastings?
Oh gosh, this is we have put together 2 exhibitions over the last 5 years of works from India because they've gone back over and over. And so I would say this is probably a third of that collection, something like that. So,
okay.
But it's 2 galleries that are full of art, and they really look great.
It's a beautiful space to be in. I will say, having been to the JDAC.
Yeah.
So, in your curator's note, and you talk about back to the issues, artists grappling with issues like identity, gender, and environmental change.
Right.
Are there examples of how we see that in the work visually?
Well, yes, there are, and there are works that are very that have overtones. There's one that portrays two men. You don't see the tops. You see them chest down, kind of, and two men who are in a city square, but you don't see the background. You just know they're there, and that kind of has to do with patriarchy, and they both are wearing beautiful mundus, the kind of skirt-like outfits, and they're. There's just this kind of feminine overtone, and yet it communicates the idea of patriarchy. And it's a beautiful, beautiful piece. The population of India is 1.4 billion. That's with a B, and India is about a third the size of the U.S. and our population is fewer than 300 million, right? And so you can imagine that many people crammed into a country, and yet they have beautiful countryside. The cities are enormous and overcrowded, and but there's lots of very beautiful countryside in India, and the people deal with it. They're used to hordes of people, and so they go about their lives. But those things do cause problems. There are issues of caste, you have religious groups, you have within religions, you have caste, you have tribal groups, you have still the remainder of colonialism, which ended in 1947, something
40s,
like that.
1940s.
Yeah, and so those things still exist, and so all of that causes tension, and on top of that, the things that people do for the primary thing being harm to the environment, and just people living life on a continent like that, as subcontinent like that, is difficult on the land. And so there are a number of pieces that deal with environmental issues. Yeah, even without knowing those things, you can walk into this exhibition, look around, and you can be intrigued and say, I wonder what that's about, but have great joy in just looking at the art without knowing.
Let's
Everything
talk about
has
that experience of walking it. What kinds of mediums do we see?
Every medium, a lot of paintings. There are a lot of three-dimensional pieces. There is an exceptional work by a man named Balay Shinde, and it's a sculpture that is made of watch faces. And the reason for the watch faces is he puts his work together in that way, and so you can literally see light through them. It's just the whole figure, but it's a fairly realistic figure. And the title of this piece is the Dabbawala, and Dabbawallas are people in Mumbai who deliver lunch to offices. So 200,000 offices get lunch daily. There are about 5,000 Dabbawallas, and they are meticulous in their pickup of lunches. They get them by bicycle, train, cart, various things, lots of cooperation among themselves to offices, hot. They arrive hot. People have their lunches. The Dabbawallas come back. They pick up everything, and off they go. And they do it meticulously. They have been studied by Harvard Business and named a wonderful program. And amazingly, they most of them cannot read. So it's really an incredible thing. So
Yeah.
He's definitely a standout. That's an unusual medium, watch faces, but it's beautiful, a beautiful piece.
Well, now I'm intrigued for sure.
Yeah.
I have to ask you one more question before I let you go, and it's not necessarily about this exhibition, but about you, because as I'm listening to you talk, you have so much detail about not only the culture that influences the art, but I've seen you talk about other collections that are completely different and from completely different places. How do you go about gathering the knowledge about putting together specific shows like this? How did you get this job, I guess, is the short question.
Well, I have been with Karen and Robert Duncan 20 years, and the collaboration between Duncans and LeBarons has been, 12, 14 years, and I've known the LeBarons a long time, and so I work for as far as exhibitions are concerned, I work with both couples. But I have to tell you, now that you brought up the thing of curating, I have an assistant curator, AJ Krakow is her name, and AJ literally did half of this show, and so I have to, to say that what we do is we research artists and write essays on each artist, and so when you see the exhibition, you'll see little, they're kind of short, but hopefully interesting essays on each piece. So very fun. And I also want to say that working with Hastings College is such a delight. And we have done, I think it's about 5 or 6 exhibitions with them for the last, 5 or 6 years. And I think usually in January, February, that we've done shows with them. And so they've been friends for a long time. The faculty members, Turner McGee and Jerome DeVos, have been friends and colleagues for a long time, so it's just a real delight to work with them.
A valuable space there in Hastings on the college campus there. Well, Ann Pagel is who I've been talking with. She's curator, along with, name your co-curator?
AJ Krakow.
AJ Krakow of Art of India. That's on view now through March 15th at the Jackson Dinsdale Art Center at Hastings College in Hastings, affectionately called the JDAC. And thank you so much for coming in
thanks,
today.
Genevieve.
What an interesting thing to learn about. And for listeners to learn more, visit the Friday Live page. That's at nebraskapublicmedia.org. To Friday Live, coming to you from the Mill Coffee and Tea in downtown Lincoln. Just a quick note before our next conversation that the First Friday concert at St. Paul at UMC downtown, they've had to cancel that concert, just a note. So if you listened to my conversation with Scott Vickroy and Ed Love from last week, the ensemble group sax will not be playing this noon. Just a quick note about that so that you don't head downtown for that. Next, television is full of smart, ambitious women. But what if those stories aren't as feminist as they seem? Kristen Hurl is an associate professor of rhetoric and public culture at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and the author of a new book, The Impossible Woman, Television, Feminism, and the Future. The book launch takes place Tuesday, February 10th, coming up 5:30 p.m. at Francie and Finch in downtown Lincoln. In her work, Hurl examines how popular film and television shape public ideas about feminism, activism, and power. And Kristen joins me now. Welcome to Friday Live.
Well, thank you.
Can you talk about the idea of the strong woman in media?
So, over the past 10, 15 years, in what's been largely regarded as the second golden age of scripted entertainment television, we've seen a proliferation of characters, women characters who are extraordinarily resilient, strong, confident, smart, who show up their male counterparts. And I've kind of...
Are there examples of those characters?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's... the people I write about, the characters would include like Leslie Knope of Parks and Recreation, or the unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, a variety of characters, and the Queen of the South is one too. I was going to say Game of Thrones as well. So across a variety of different genres, we see incredibly strong, not just strong women. I mean, that's been a kind of a type that goes beyond. But I was noticing that these particular characters were impossible because they were impossibly resilient.
So what's the result of seeing that if we see someone who is impossibly resilient?
So, well, I mean, it creates a impossible standard for us by which we might measure our own accomplishments and abilities. And that's been kind of a long-standing critique of particularly U.S. media culture's depiction of what women's accomplishments might look like.
So, Kristen, another term I came across, what is sexist realism?
So the part of my book is to note that within the category of these impossible women, that what also makes them impossible is that despite the fact that they're magical, unbreakable, and tireless, that also the series suggests that it was impossible for them to actually meet their goals because sexism, sexist men, misogynist institutions, and sexual violence continually got in their way. And that if these women were able to, because of their gumption and smarts and talents, rise up at all in the ranks of male-dominated institutions, that it usually meant sacrificing their commitments to people more vulnerable than them. So their achievements on some level were impossible, but also larger feminist goals proved to be impossible for them as well.
I love that you used the word tirelessly. You always hear that phrase, she tirelessly supported her family or worked for journalism, and I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure she was tired.
Right. And it's frustrating, I think, that our entertainment culture also cultivates this idea that tirelessness is an ideal to which we should strive for, because that's not healthy for any of us.
How can screenwriters write better women characters?
I don't necessarily think the problem lies with screenwriters. I think there are a variety of screenwriters that want better characters. But I think that those screenwriters need to work within institutions that want to support better stories. Okay? So I've noted there's a slight distinction. I don't want to make too much of it, but some distinction between what I see in a lot of British television programming, where characters are not impossible, where there are some flawed characters, where there are strong women characters throughout, but often we see that they're actually able to manage a family life and a workplace life, that we see those characters learn from their mistakes and aspects of their lives do change and shift and grow. We just see that a lot less in U.S.-based television, and I think it's because the broader organizations, like the producers, the editors, who help craft ideas for what kind of stories they want, don't imagine there's a market for that in the U.S.
What are some of the shows and movies then that you looked into as you were researching for the book?
So,
and did it cross all cultures or all different?
I mean, I looked briefly, right? This is a smaller sampling.
Gotcha.
So really, I'm just sort of comparing what I saw between the shows I wrote about in the book that I think illustrate sexist realism. The idea that patriarchy is here to stay. We should fight it, but it's here to stay. And I think that that's really common in U.S.-based television, or has been for a while. But I was just noting in my viewing, in my leisure time, that there are there's a crime drama called Karen Peary out. It's I think a BBC drama, in which a woman is entirely possible, and she's confident and competent, and people respect her. Right? And it's a world in which just sexism isn't the main issue.
So I'm assuming at your Francie and Finch event, you'll read some segments, answer a few questions.
Yeah, it'll largely be a Q&A.
Okay.
I'll talk a little bit about the overarching themes of the book, the issues at stake, and then also talk about what's next. Right? I think girl boss feminism is on the way out as a cultural ideal, but what's next might not actually be the kind of feminist visions that most women who want a better world that I know are looking for.
Interesting stuff. Well, if there's any questions you have for my guest, Kristen Hurl, you can ask them at the Q&A. I've been speaking with her. She is Associate Professor of Rhetoric and Public Culture at the UNL, at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and author of The Impossible Woman, Television, Feminism, and the Future. Looking forward into the future. That book launch, again, is coming up Tuesday, February 10th, 5:30 p.m. at Francie and Finch in Lincoln. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's an interesting topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And for links to more information about this and everything that you heard about today, visit the Friday Live page. That is at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Stick around later for a preview of a comic play that's on stage in Grand Island and our live poetry segment yet to come as well. When you subscribe to the Friday Live podcast or listen on our website, you'll see there's a little something extra to discover. The Friday Live Extra is our digital and online-only feature with one or two more conversations. And this week, we have an extra. Hear a conversation with Jonathan Van Ness, who was to have appeared in Omaha tonight, but whose comedy show has been postponed due to illness. You can still hear our chat about the age-old art of comedy.
People say there's like that one oldest like job in the world, but I feel like stand-up comedy, honey, is really, it's the oldest art form. And you can almost feel the comedians and the performers that have come before you that are also currently alongside you. Like, it's just such an honor and it's so exciting.
Hear our conversation by heading to the Friday Live page to listen at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Support for programming comes from Cornerstone Bank, a family-owned bank providing custom investments, trust, and estate planning services since 1882 with 48 Nebraska locations. To learn more, cornerstoneconnect.com. Cornerstone Bank, building trust on a solid foundation. Support for programming also comes from Constellation Studios, a mixed-use artist's workspace for all types of printmaking and paper projects, featuring printing presses, bookmaking, type shop, and wet paper studio. For info, constellation-studios.net.
Next here on Friday Live, they say that life gets better after 50, but not for George Thomas, the main character of The Big 5-0. It's a comedy by Brian Mitchell about a man whose 50th birthday week goes completely off the rails. His dog is sick, his son is a slacker, his daughter wants to marry a Republican. Along the way, George reckons with family, parenthood, his future, and the results of his latest physical. I can say I've been there. The Big 5-0, presented by Grand Island Little Theater, opens tonight at 7:30 at College Park in Grand Island. And it's running this weekend and next, February 6th through the 8th and 13th through the 15th. So I'm joined by the director here for more about this, Jim Truill. Jim, it's great to have you on Friday Live.
Well, thank you. Nice to be here.
What is it about turning 50 specifically that feels like such a transitional moment for people?
I have no idea because I've gone way past that number. But I think the Big 5-0 is there because that's when everybody finally gets kids out of the house usually, and things begin changing from what was a big family to not so big. And life is now changing for just two people.
So what goes into directing the show? And Jim, since you mentioned you're past the 5-0, do you pull a little of your personal experience in directing the show?
Well, I think a good director should be empathetic, have a feeling for those people that are being portrayed. And so I try to show and get my characters to come alive with that a little bit. I'm kind of a flexible director in that I want the characters, the actors, to become the characters as they see them. I might change that a little bit and push one way or another, but my job is mainly to make sure they start getting the feel of who they are.
Well, so let's get to know one of our characters and who he is, the main character, George. It's funny that you mentioned that by age 50, a lot of folks are experiencing a sort of transition in their lives, maybe getting some of their time back. But George has a lot less control over his life than it seems like he thought he would have by the Big 5-0. How does this play kind of explore gaining power over your life versus knowing when it's time to let go of things? What's the control versus not control ratio in this play?
George is in a rut, is the problem. He's one of those people that has been doing the same thing now since, as a professor of sociology of all things, since his son was 8 years old. His son is now 22. So for the past 14 years, he's been doing the same thing in the same method and doing this with the same people. And he's kind of found himself in a rut. He's a diehard Democrat, doesn't know anything but that, and has no ability to see the other side. Sort of like the way life is at the moment, it seems like. And he's becoming aware that there's another side to what life is. And in 50, he's waking up and saying, well, maybe there is something else here I need to look at.
I love that the political affiliation has come into part of the comedy here.
Oh, it's absolutely hilarious, yes.
Especially in these times, as you mentioned. Jim, I want to mention for listeners, you yourself are a semi-retired attorney as well as the director for this show. What is balancing that like? How long have you been involved in theater, and why do you do it?
Well, I started practicing law in 1974, so I've been doing this for a while. But really, what got me involved in theater was just a notice in the paper that there's an audition. Show that was being auditioned was Harvey, which, if you'll recall, had James Stewart in the lead. And I knew the movie. It was hilarious. I said, well, that might be interesting to try to be in that show and see what it's like. So I just said, what the hell, I'll try out and see if I can get a small part. I ended up being cast as the lead and have been involved in Guilt now ever since. Started out just acting, parts there, here and there. Did the Same Time Next Year, which is a 2-person play. And eventually they started saying, oh, you're kind of skilled with the drill and the saw and the hammer. You want to help build sets. So I started volunteering building sets. And then they said, well, we don't know, the lights aren't set up right. And I said, well, let me see if I can get those lights adjusted. So in the long run, what happened is eventually they kept saying, can you do this? And I just said, well, yeah, I can try. And I have been. So one of my first shows I think I directed might have been Dracula, which was a comedy at the time. And I've just sort of been involved ever since whenever I need something, including being the president of the board and on the board and fundraising, you name it, there I am.
Well, this is a word to the wise for listeners across the state who might get involved with their local community theater and find themselves involved for a long time. It sounds like rewarding years of experience here, Jim.
You get involved in the theater and suddenly you've got yourself a family that is always there.
I love to hear that. Well, the family here in this show is producing The Big 5-0 by Brian Mitchell. And again, that opens tonight at 7:30. It's running this weekend and next. So February 6th through the 8th and 13th through the 15th. It's the Grand Island Little Theater, or GILT, as they like to say. Gilt like gold, G-I-L-T. The play explores some midlife issues, family, and what happens when a man turning 50 is forced to finally, grow up, let's say. And to learn more, you can go to the Friday Live page at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Jim Truill is my guest, the director. It's been such a pleasure to chat with you, Jim. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being on the show with you.
And this is Friday Live from Nebraska Public Media.
I'm joined next here by Maria Nazos at the Mill in downtown Lincoln. We will chat about her new collection of poetry here in a few moments, but let's get right to her work. Good morning, Maria.
Good morning.
What have you brought to read for us today?
Yes, I will kick us off with a poem about how sometimes even the small domestic disasters can be a true blessing. It is entitled, it's an homage to myself, Self-Portrait as a Clogged Toilet. For once, a disaster you can control. Wild, wet rat girl hunkered at the bottom of your self-made sewer. Now the tide flows over your great white goblet. You should clink it with another glass. Here's to normal people problems you've bent your head in prayer for before. At that same pale altar, after drinking too much yellowtail, because whatever half-mad man you loved sank deeper into his own drink, or went fishing with a younger girl, or stained your door with his manic shadow. Some days you have to praise the simple outpouring of your own crap. Here's to skid-marked years you soiled your reputation as a tired angel held back your hair, patient as a reflection, only for you to cough and plunge into another's arms. Whatever weary force turned back clean blood tests, whatever unnameable thing expelled bad choices from your body, must be knelt before in prayer. And now you watch the bowl erupt with what you thought was contained onto the white tile floor. And maybe this is God's giant white phone, those years you called and just heard the ringing of your hungover, off-the-hook head. Perhaps there was always the answer. Maybe not the one you wanted, but maybe the one you needed, telling you, don't cry over spilled crap, telling you, rise and scrub your human mess. And now sewage floods your floor, and still, you wade out into the dirty, blessed waters of what you swore you left behind for good.
Thank you for reading that one. Yes. Amazing. Do you have another one for us? Yes?
Yes, I do.
All right.
Yes.
What's
So,
next?
yeah. So this one goes out to my friend and former student Rick Christensen. He's also put out a book, and trigger warning, he lost his dog a little while ago, and so this is a poem called The Guzzle, a lot of repetition, and it's to Annie, his beautiful basset hound. May she rest in peace. Annie's Guzzle. Not just a dog or poem, not just dead. Today she's your memory. Waking you at night to take her out, reminding you she wasn't yet a memory. At 2 a.m., nudging you from arthritic dreams. For a minute, you'd forget your bad hip, half awake, walking her into Missouri rain, her old body, an enemy that continued to begrudge itself. Does anyone have a love they've not put to rest? If not, this poem is for you and everybody who's lost someone, anyone they've loved. Your granddaughter stroked her long ears one last time and said, "You'll go to sleep. Please remember me." The best way you can love is to sometimes put the person down to rest before they fail and fall so deeply they're stripped of their dignity. You, born to a mother who held your head underwater during baths, your tiny body flailing, trying to breathe, your hair an anemone. Still, you push through group homes and steel bars and set aside firearms, grew into a father, fell in love, divorced, fell in love, and now write poetry. Before you set her free, you held her on the table. Did her dewy eyes realize that death is sometimes what we're left, our only remedy? And even now, as your house stands silent, there's a hound somewhere late at night, begging for a man to let her out. And her name is Annie. Thank you.
Yes, lots of claps in the room. Many dog owners, I feel, Maria. Oh, thank you. We have time for one more.
Perfect.
So, and then we'll chat about your new collection. What's your final poem for this morning?
Yes, my final poem is for yet another student, and I won't name names this time, and it's also for Nebraskans, and it's a poem of hope and sadness for the times we live in. Nebraska Means Flat Water is the title. And I lifted an epigraph from a line that a student wrote to me, and wow, it starts with, I don't want to die with nothing to show, and in this world, good men die screaming. Hold a blade of bunch grass in your palm. Imagine ways to snap it. Think of splitting land as plate tectonics. Remember, Nebraska means flat water, and that flat water is what you call the river hardly moving past your trailer, which you thought as a boy would take you away. Call this land by what it never had: mountains, grottos, oceans, love. I see you in the corner of my class. I hear you speak your words, a loud rush that nobody seems to hear. If you let it, this land will take you, a young man who withdraws his stove-scorched hand from a world he wants to set aflame. You struggle to be seen against the busy backdrop of the sun-flecked prairie from inside the mobile home with the recovering mother whose love has long fled the nest. You want to be heard over the clucking of well-meaning relatives who say your words are scrawled in disappearing ink, and I feel a canyon between us filling with the hollow echo of teacher-student. I know how it feels to speak without air. I know how golden fields can choke you. And I have seen the best men die screaming and silent, holding their breath forever underwater. I fear for you. You are writing a pickaxe into my heart. The same unease twists me when I scan the plains and see how I wrote my way out but can't leave memories of those whose words left them nothing but a rubbed out page. Carry the pencil mark not as a flag of surrender, but a sail to push you through this deep, flat river, past anyone who would rather see you sink in silence. Thank you.
Maria Nazo is here this morning reading her poetry on Nebraska Public Media's Friday Live. We heard Nebraska Means Flat Water. Before that, Annie's Guzzle. And she started with self-portrait as Clogged Toilet. We are coming to you here from the Mill Coffee and Tea. And with that in mind, I am excited to learn more about your new collection, Pulse, published by Omnidon. When did you start the collection, or maybe what was the original inspiration?
That's a great question. I began the collection 16 years ago, and it dramatically morphed since then. And it went from what it was at the time, I think it was titled something completely different. And of course, 16 years ago, the political climate was a lot different. I was a lot different, everything like that, for better and for worse, mostly for better. And then, as it became my thesis, I was studying with Ted Kooser, and I went to a writing conference, and they gave me a really cool exercise. By then, I had changed the title a million times, and they said, okay, for this exercise, you aren't allowed to use words, but I want you to draw your book. And I'd initially titled it Change in Altitude. And so I went ahead and I drew the book cover, and I realized one of the major themes that occurred in it was the Pulse nightclub, including the unfortunate and horrible Pulse nightclub massacre, in addition to everything about this political, crazy administration, all of that. And so I drew my picture, and it had a plane, and it had people, life, death, and then it had the Pulse nightclub. And the instructor said, wait a minute, you're not supposed to use words, and you already broke the first rule. And I sort of like burst out laughing, but I was embarrassed because I wanted to be a good student who follows the rule. And I was like, I'm so sorry. He goes, no. Why'd you do it? That's good. So Pulse. And then I realized we all have it. We all do it. Why was it that my subconscious wanted to kind of break through? Why was it that it wanted to break the rules? Well, it's because it had something more intentional in mind. So that's kind of how it all came about. And if anyone's putting together a collection and you're trying to find your way, try that exercise.
That's an interesting exercise to draw instead of actually use your words when you're, one description of this collection reads, it demonstrates how we overcome difficulties even when it hurts to breathe. So can you delve into that deeper? Hurts to breathe. What's the part that's hurting that makes you not able to breathe?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so much right now, and like I said, different things at the other point in my life throughout the time writing that book. So those things morphed into different things. Whereas, of course, currently right now, let's face it, even if we're trying to protect ourselves and we're not on social media or on the news a lot, we still want to and need to be somewhat cognizant. But here we are awash with all of this different disturbing, consistent events. And so in that particular moment, and all of these moments, how is it that we breathe through it? How is it that we survive? And what if we don't? And is that okay too? And those are just some of the questions it opens up.
If you write as a way of healing, do you also read as a way of healing?
Yeah, that too is a great question. I don't know if either one can heal anything, but I know that in moments like now, I feel, how do I put this? I feel better because we're gathering as like-minded people. And that is proof to me the arts are still alive. We're still here. As hopeless as things may seem, every single day there are people consistently gathering who are defying the odds. In little moments, in big moments, whatever it is, in kindness and collectivity here in this actual venue, we still, we have this. This is what's going on too amid the madness.
Maria Nazo, she is my guest here this morning. We heard her read her poem, Self-Portrait as a Clogged Toilet. Very creative on that one. Annie's Guzzle, Nebraska Means Flat Water. And she's got a new collection of work. It's been published in places like The New Yorker, Tri-Quarterly, World Literature Today. That collection is called Pulse, and it will be out April 6th of this year. Such a pleasure chatting with you this morning, Maria. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
The mysterious circumstances around the disappearance of a 10-year-old girl's father begins Susan Choi's novel, Flashlight, a story that spans decades and continents dealing with family, loss, and memory. All About Books host Pat Leach admits she struggled at times with the story.
What I know about myself as a reader is I want character development. And I also add a big bias toward characters figuring out how to be open and honest with themselves and each other to become truly connected. I grow impatient when that doesn't seem to be happening, which is why I had decided to quit this book. I'm glad I returned to it. Yes, I wrestled with this novel, but I turned the final page with admiration and respect for all that went into it.
To hear a complete review of Flashlight by Susan Choi, go online to see an archive of all our shows, nebraskapublicmedia.org/allaboutbooks. Support for programming comes from St. Paul United Methodist Church, based in the heart of downtown Lincoln. Worship services take place on Sundays at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. in person or online. All are loved and welcome here. Learn more at stpaulumc.org. Support for programming also comes from Great Plains Piano Company, offering sales of both new and pre-owned pianos, including Mason & Hamlin, Steinway, Yamaha, and Petroff. Online at greatplainspiano.com.
A chance meeting in a grocery store on Thanksgiving night in 1973 becomes the start of an unexpected friendship in the Hart Cellars. Opening Thursday, February 5th at 7:30 and running through March 1st at the Blue Barn Theater in Omaha. It was written by Lloyd Suh. The play follows Jane and Luna, two recent Asian immigrants finding connection, humor, and clarity over wine, a frozen turkey, and conversations about belonging in a new country. Evelyn Choi is in the role of Jane, and Wai Yim is the director. They both join me now. Welcome.
Hello, hello.
Well, so Evelyn, how did you get involved in this play, and what is Jane like?
I found out about the play when I was in LA like a year ago. I just fell in love with the play because it's just my story. I came to the States when I was in my early 20s. Jane is like that. I couldn't speak the language and I didn't know anyone. I completely felt lonely all the time. because I couldn't, speak to anyone at that time. And then Jane is like that. It's about my story as Jay's story is the same. So I just immediately connect to the character, and then I just fell in love with the story, and then I kept auditioning, and then Y picked me up, so I am in the show.
Yes, it was such a beautiful, coincidence, lucky find, or however you want to put it. The role of Jane was what I was worried about when we were casting the show and when I proposed the show to Boo Barn. I know we have some actor that is possibly good for the other role, Luna, but Jane is the one that I worry about the most. And then all of a sudden, out of the ether, here comes Evelyn Choi, and when I look at the audition, it was perfect, and her experience, in opera and musical theater, she is quite a star from Korea, to be honest. So I was very happy and excited to have her here in Omaha, Nebraska.
I know. I'm so super excited.
This is wonderful. Well, and why you're originally from Hong Kong, but you've spent much of your life in Omaha and Chicago. I wonder how you also identify it with your own story with an Asian American identity and immigration, and how you relate to the two characters of June and Luna.
When I read the play, I cry, I scream, I laugh. It's quite eerie that to feel and see what my experience is being portrayed on stage. It's literally to a T, like completely from coming to America, even going through the immigration office, the feeling of completely isolated, even though we both, me and Evelyn, and also Biana. Biana is a local actor here in Omaha, and she'll be playing Luna, the other character. She's from the Philippines. And even though we all learn how to read and write in English, but the speed and just the speed of speaking and listening to the English language when we first came here is mind-boggling.
Right.
And, just the idea of oh my God, this is going to be my life. And the constant struggle of being seen or understood, or the loneliness because we literally cannot communicate our feelings in English to anyone. And we have to put on a face. Oh, we are completely fine. Everything is good. And, we love America and we're willing to work really hard for it. And those are all true. But that loneliness and that don't know where to turn, or the helplessness when we first came to America, they are all in the show.
It strikes me as you're both talking about this with expression and with language. I mean, you might be able to say, oh, yes, I'm happy or I'm sad, but there's more detail, there's more complexity to our emotions and our feelings than that, which is part of what's hard to express. I wonder if there are moments that we see on stage between June and Luna that might be an example.
I think loneliness is universal. Like, we all feel lonely in this world, no matter what. But with this experience, because it is such a unescapable feeling. When we came to America, it's all or nothing in a way. We can't just say, oh, we don't like it, I'm just going to go back to Korea. I'm just going to go back to the Philippines. We're just going to go back to Hong Kong. Because we made a choice to come to America. So that loneliness is also so caged. We have to swallow it. We have to, we don't know how to make friends. English is not on our side. And there's always going to be a barrier. But then our loneliness is a little bit more layered. There's an helplessness to it. And then you can see that on the stage. You also see the hope with it, because the two immigrants that have a shared experience of that type of loneliness, the helplessness, loneliness, and the hope and dream to find someone that understands, to make something out of nowhere, to become friends with someone just because of our skin color and our accent, our language differences.
is quite an experience when you see it on stage.
One interesting thing that the writer employs in this play is that it's set over the course of one single evening, yes?
Mm-hmm.
So how does that time frame affect how we get to know June and Luna? How do you feel in the role of June with that one, Evelyn?
So it's on Thanksgiving Day, and then they meet at a supermarket, right? And then they
Yes.
go to Luna's apartment, and then the awkwardness, but they immediately becomes friends because they know how their life is in America. It's a really beautiful setting, and then Thanksgiving, like I remember when I was in America, first time Thanksgiving, I didn't know what to do because I had no family and I don't know how to cook turkey. So maybe I'm just going to go to KFC and buy, chicken wings and then eat by myself.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just a really beautiful setting. They're trying to be American, but they're not American. So it just reminded me of me being in young adult, being in America.
It's also is it believable? Oh my God, two stranger meeting in a supermarket and then we go to a stranger apartment to cook turkey? Is it like, what do you mean? It's not believable. But on our side, I found completely believable.
Yep.
When we first came to America, for me personally, when I'm in school, in high school at Newlet South High School, as soon as I see another Asian student, I'm like, oh my God, another Asian. I wonder if, she is from Hong Kong, or like, do we speak the language? And there's so much question. There's an ease when you see other Asian or, other people that looks like you. So I do believe that is quite believable. It is believable. And Loy Se, the writer, choose Thanksgiving, which is quite a beautiful holiday. We can set it in Christmas, but we all have Christmas holiday. We might not celebrate in Asia, but there is a very well-shared holiday. But like Thanksgiving or the 4th of July is so uniquely American. And just the idea of Thanksgiving, the word Thanksgiving, to giving thanks, to be grateful, to be able to celebrate something, even though we have struggled all year or, all our life. This is one day that we can be grateful for our challenges and our success. I think it's a beautiful event that is set place especially for Thanksgiving.
And I just want to correct myself. I said June earlier, and your character is Jane, Evelyn. My apologies. So make sure I put that correction in there.
And you will find out why her name is Jane if you come to see the show.
Okay. So there's a reason behind that. That's a good tease why.
Yes, it's a beautiful and funny reason. Like, come see the show and you'll find out.
Evelyn, anything before I let the two of you go that you want to add for our listeners that you think people should know about this play?
I think everyone should see the show, The Heart Sellers, because it tells a really deeply human story about immigration and loneliness and belonging experiences that a lot of people can relate to, no matter where they're from.
I would encourage and plead to you that if you come see it, I hope that you will be able to open your heart and experience or understand what the other, what the immigration, all the immigrants might have been through.
A human story, not just an immigrant story. And one of the stars of this show is my guest, Evelyn Choi, who is in the role of Jane. The play is The Heart Sellers. Yim is the director, and that show runs February 5th through March 1st at Blue Barn Theater in Omaha. As usual, we will have more information on the Friday Live page. That's at nebraskapublicmedia.org. And Evelyn, thank you so much. A joy to talk with you about this show.
Thank you so much for having me.
And for more information on this, as well as other events happening around the state, head to that website, nebraskapublicmedia.org. I'm Genevieve Randall.
Coming up this morning on Nebraska Public Media, music from Nebraska's stages on Nebraska Concerts, hosted by Laura Black. And this afternoon, Penelope Morrow celebrates the weekend and brings you classics by request. Be sure to visit the Nebraska Public Media website for podcasts of the show at nebraskapublicmedia.org. Portions of Friday Live are pre-recorded. Our theme music was written and performed by Alexios Anist. Friday Live is not possible without the collaboration of Brendan Rook, Phoenix Carroll, KJ Tedder, Cole McEwen, and associate producer Arthur Jones. I'm Genevieve Randall. Everything we do at Nebraska Public Media is possible only with members who donate. This podcast version of our weekly radio show Friday Live, podcasts of our television show Backyard Farmer, and so much more, all of it is thanks to donors, underwriters, and other private support. You can support Nebraska Public Media online at nebraskapublicmedia.org.